In ancient Egypt, one ruler's legacy was so powerful, so defiant, that her successors tried to literally erase her from history. They smashed her statues, chiseled her name from temple walls, and did everything they could to pretend she never existed. What was her crime? She was a woman who dared to be king. This is the story of Hatshepsut, and why this queen of Egypt had to rule dressed as a man. Introduction to the era, the golden age of the new kingdom. To get why Hatshepsut's story is so incredible, you have to understand the world she was born into. The 15th century BCE, the absolute height of Egypt's new kingdom. This was a golden age of wealth and power. Hatshepsut's family, the 18th dynasty, were warrior pharaohs who had kicked out foreign invaders and forged a massive empire, stretching from modern-day Sudan all the way to Syria. Gold was flowing in. Tribute from conquered lands filled the treasuries, and Egypt was on top of the world. At the very center of this empire was the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was more than just a king. He was seen as a god on earth. He was the living Horus, the son of the sun god Ra, the one person who stood between the gods and mortal humans. His most important job was to uphold Mat, the cosmic principle of order, truth, and balance. Mat kept the universe running smoothly and held back its opposite, Isfet or chaos. The Pharaoh's strength and piety were what kept the world in balance. And for well over 1,000 years, the Pharaoh was a man, while a few women had held power as regents or even briefly as rulers. The ideology, the imagery, and the religion of Egypt were all built around a male king. The masculine power of the Pharaoh was tied directly to the strength and fertility of the nation itself. This belief was the bedrock of their society. Our story starts with one of the dynasty's great pharaohs, Thutmose I. He was a powerful military commander and Hatshepsut's father. From him, she inherited a claim to the throne of incredible purity because her mother, Ahmose, was the great royal wife. Hatshepsut was a princess of the absolute highest rank. But in a world where power passed from father to son, her gender was supposed to be an unbreakable barrier. Or so it seemed. The stability of the empire depended on a clear male heir, but a series of royal deaths and political crises was about to create a problem that only one woman had the courage to solve. Early life and rise to power, from princess to queen regent Hatshepsut, was born directly into the center of power. As the daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I and his chief queen, she had a divine status that almost no one could challenge. And while her father had sons with other, lesser wives, Hatshepsut was the top-ranking royal child, a direct link to the queen's powerful bloodline. As was common practice in the royal family to keep power concentrated, Hatshepsut was married to her own half-brother, Thutmose II, when she was likely just a young teenager. He was the son of a secondary wife, so marrying the pure-blooded Hatshepsut was what secured his claim to the throne, which he took around 1492 BCE. Thutmose II's reign wasn't very long or impressive. He seems to have been a somewhat frail ruler, and it's very likely that the smart and ambitious Hatshepsut was already wielding a lot of influence behind the scenes. Together, they had one daughter, Nephir, but crucially, no son. The future of the dynasty fell to the son of another wife from the harem, a woman named Isit. When Thutmose II died young around 1479 BCE, this infant son, also named Thutmose, was the heir. This left Egypt in a tough spot. The new pharaoh, Thutmose III, was just a child, totally unable to rule. The stability of the empire was at risk. Usually, the king's mother would step in as regent, but the boy's mother, Isit, just didn't have the royal status or political muscle for the job. So the responsibility fell to the most powerful and legitimate royal woman in Egypt, the Dowager Queen, Hatshepsut. For the first few years, Hatshepsut played her part as regent just as everyone expected. She was the dutiful stepmother and queen, running the government on behalf of the young king. Official art from this time shows her standing behind her stepson in the traditional supportive role of a queen. She was the power behind the throne, but not yet the power on the throne. But this arrangement wasn't going to be enough. We don't know if it was pure personal ambition or a genuine belief that she was the better choice to rule. But Hatshepsut started laying the groundwork for a move that was unheard of in Egyptian history. She wasn't just going to rule for the king. She was going to become king. Slowly, she began elevating her own status, taking on titles that blurred the lines between queen and pharaoh. The stage was being set for a revolution, not of swords and soldiers, but of identity and propaganda. The transformation, a bold move that shocked Egyptian society about 7 years into her regency. Hatshepsut made her move. It was a bold and calculated power play that would change Egyptian history forever. She had herself crowned, not as a queen, but as a pharaoh, taking on the full 5-part royal title of a king. She became Matker Hatshepsut, co-ruler of Egypt with her young stepson. But this was a co-rule in name only. From that moment, Hatshepsut was the senior king, the real power in the land. So how did she pull this off in such a deeply patriarchal society? How did she justify breaking with thousands of years of tradition? Hatshepsut knew she couldn't just take power. She had to earn it in the eyes of the gods and her people. This called for one of the most brilliant PR campaigns of the ancient world. First, she had to rewrite her own origin story. She had to prove her rule wasn't a violation of Mat, but its destiny. She commissioned a breathtaking series of carvings on the walls of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari that told the story of her divine birth. In this carefully crafted myth, the great god Amun-Ra himself decided to create a divine ruler for Egypt. He took the form of her father, Thutmose I, and visited Queen Ahmose. The carvings show the god impregnating the queen with his divine breath. The message was clear. Hatshepsut wasn't just the daughter of a mortal king. She was the physical daughter of the most powerful god in Egypt. Her rule was preordained. This wasn't just a fantasy. It was a political masterstroke. By claiming a divine father, she completely sidestepped the awkward issue of her gender. She backed this up by publicizing an oracle from Amun that declared her his chosen successor, and by claiming her earthly father had also named her as his heir. With her divine right to rule established, she had a practical problem to solve: the imagery of kingship. Every symbol of the pharaoh, the crowns, the scepter, the kilt was male. There was simply no template for a female king. So Hatshepsut made another radical choice. She would conform to the office, not the other way around. In statues and reliefs, she started appearing in the full costume of a male pharaoh. Her image was carved with the broad shoulders and muscular body of a man. She wore the traditional kilt, the iconic striped headdress, and most startlingly, the false beard, a sacred symbol of the pharaoh's divine male power. Now, it's important to realize this wasn't about tricking people into thinking she was a man. Everyone knew she was a woman. In fact, inscriptions from her reign often mix masculine and feminine terms, calling her His Majesty in one line and Daughter of Ra in the next. The male costume was a symbolic uniform. In ancient Egypt, art showed things as they should be ideologically, not as they literally were. The job of pharaoh was male, so to be a successful pharaoh, she had to be shown in the male form that went with the job. To secure her power, she surrounded herself with loyal and brilliant officials. Chief among them was a man named Senenmut. He came from a humble background, but rose to become one of the most powerful men in Egypt, holding titles like chief architect and steward of Amun. He was her daughter's tutor, and so trusted that Hatshepsut allowed him the unheard-of privilege of placing his own image in hidden corners of her temple. Through brilliant propaganda, symbolic transformation, and smart politics, Hatshepsut had done the impossible. She had become king. The pharaoh in a false beard, reign and accomplishments. Once she was firmly on the throne, Hatshepsut's reign ushered in an era of peace and incredible prosperity that lasted for more than 2 decades. Unlike the warrior pharaohs before and after her main focus wasn't military conquest. Instead, she poured Egypt's resources into massive building projects and re-establishing trade routes that had been neglected. Her reign is defined by its architectural splendor. She was one of the most prolific builders in Egyptian history. She made huge additions to the great temple of Amun at Karnak, the religious center of the empire. There, she put up 2 colossal obelisks of red granite, each one nearly 100 feet tall. At the time, they were the tallest in the world, shining monuments to her power. But her crowning achievement is her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, on the west bank of the Nile at Thebes. Known as Djeser Djeseru, or Holiest of Holies, the temple is an architectural masterpiece designed by her right-hand man, Senenmut. Its sweeping, colonnaded terraces rise in perfect harmony with the cliffs behind them, and it's still considered one of the wonders of the ancient world. The temple walls were her autobiography in stone, telling the story of her divine birth and coronation. And it's here that she recorded what might be her greatest foreign policy achievement: a massive trade expedition to the fabled land of Punt. Punt, which scholars believe was somewhere in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia, was a semi-mythical place Egyptians called God's Land. In the 9th year of her reign, Hatshepsut sent a fleet of 5 large ships down the Red Sea on a bold voyage. The temple reliefs show the whole journey in amazing detail. We see the Egyptian ships arriving, and the crew meeting the chief of Punt and his wife, Queen Ati, who is famously shown with features that suggest a condition like lymphedema. The carvings list the incredible treasures the Egyptians brought back: gold, ivory, ebony, and precious resins like frankincense and myrrh. Most remarkably, they brought back 31 live myrrh trees, their roots carefully wrapped for the journey home. These were replanted on the terraces of her temple, marking the first known successful transplant of foreign trees in history. The expedition was a huge success. It enriched Egypt and served as powerful propaganda, showing that Hatshepsut could bring the blessings of the gods and the riches of the world to her people. Her reign was a golden age, all overseen by a pharaoh who ruled peacefully and successfully in the guise of a man. The story of Hatshepsut is packed with mysteries and achievements that still fascinate us today. If you're enjoying this look into ancient Egypt, please take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the ancient world. The mystery of her disappearance, the erased queen. After a reign of about 22 years, one of the longest and most prosperous of her dynasty, Hatshepsut vanishes from the historical record. She likely died of natural causes. Analysis of her mummy suggests she was a woman in her 50s who suffered from diabetes and bone cancer. She was buried as a pharaoh in the Valley of the Kings, but her story doesn't end there. Decades after her death, late in the reign of her successor, Thutmose III, a systematic campaign to erase her from history began. It was a shocking act of what historians call damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. All across Egypt, her statues were smashed and dumped into pits. On temple walls and obelisks, her image as king was carefully chiseled away. Her name was scraped from the stone, often replaced by the names of her father, her husband, or her stepson, Thutmose III. It was a thorough and targeted attack, an attempt to make it seem as if a female king had never existed at all. For a long time, the obvious theory was that this was simple revenge. Thutmose III, the stepson who had to wait in the wings for 20 years while his stepmother ruled, was finally getting even. It's a dramatic story, but most Egyptologists today think the real motivation was more political. The biggest clue is the timing. Thutmose III didn't start the erasure right after she died. He waited nearly 20 years, until the very end of his own long and successful reign. By then, Thutmose III, who had become one of Egypt's greatest military pharaohs, was an old man thinking about his own legacy. His chosen heir had no blood connection to Hatshepsut's powerful royal line. The theory is that Thutmose III erased Hatshepsut to get rid of a powerful female precedent. He needed to ensure a smooth, traditional, male-only succession for his son. By removing her from the records, he was correcting history to make sure no future royal woman would get the same idea. It wasn't about hating Hatshepsut. It was about protecting the patriarchal system of kingship and securing his own dynasty. Legacy and rediscovery. Finding the lost Pharaoh Thutmose III's campaign of erasure was incredibly effective. For almost 3,000 years, Hatshepsut was forgotten, a missing link in the chain of Egyptian kings. Her story was a puzzle hidden in plain sight. It wasn't until the 19th century, when scholars finally began to decipher the hieroglyphs on the walls of her temple at Deir el-Bahari, that the truth started to come out. They saw a king who was sometimes described with feminine words, a contradiction that slowly revealed the story of the lost female pharaoh. Her body was also lost for a time. Her original tomb was known, but her mummy wasn't in it. The mystery wasn't solved until 2007. Inside a small, plain tomb, 2 female mummies had been found decades earlier. One was her wet nurse. The other was an anonymous, overweight woman. But a box found elsewhere, inscribed with Hatshepsut's name, contained a mummified liver and a single molar tooth. In what is considered a landmark piece of forensic detective work, a team CT scanned the anonymous mummy. The scan revealed a gap in her jaw that was a perfect match for the loose tooth. While a few scholars still debate the absolute certainty of the match, the wide consensus is that the lost queen had finally been found. The rediscovery of Hatshepsut has restored her to her rightful place as one of Egypt's most effective pharaohs. Her time on the throne wasn't about war, but about prosperity, art, and innovation. She was a master of politics and propaganda who bent the rigid rules of her society to claim the ultimate power. She did it not by hiding her femininity, but by insisting that her divine right to rule was more important than her gender. So why did a queen of Egypt rule dressed like a man? The answer isn't that she wanted to be a man. She wanted to be a king. In ancient Egypt, the office of pharaoh was an institution with symbols and traditions that were exclusively male. To be seen as a legitimate ruler and to uphold the cosmic order, Hatshepsut had to put on the uniform of kingship. The false beard, the kilt, the male physique in her statues, these were the required costume for the job. It was a brilliant and strategic solution to what seemed like an impossible problem. She didn't erase her female identity in her inscriptions, but she embraced the male symbols of power to fulfill her political destiny. The fact that her successors tried to erase her from history isn't a judgment on her reign, which was peaceful and successful, but a testament to how deeply her power challenged the traditions of her world. Hatshepsut's story is a timeless reminder of how ambition, intelligence, and a masterful understanding of power can reshape the world. She wasn't just a queen who acted like a king. She was a pharaoh in her own right. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the life of Hatshepsut. What part of her story do you find the most fascinating? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the greatest stories from history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We'll see you next time.